Test. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Cross-Region Resource Management panel discussion. We're just waiting for one more panelist to come, Martin Levy. The others are ready, so let's give him a few minutes to show up. Okay, I think Martin is missing in action. We haven't been able to contact him. So we'll have to survive with 3 panelists from 4 that we originally planned. So can I please invite Anurag, Aftab, and Jeff to the podium, please? Oh, he's coming. Okay, great. Aftab said that Martin wasn't looking well last night, so we were worried. All right, while waiting for Martin, this session is about the issues around identifying and ascertaining holders of IP address, which is a fundamental thing that needs to be done correctly when you're running a network. So there's a basic assumption, all the discussion about routing security, about best practice in network operations, assume that there is a good knowledge of who holds what IP addresses. And the reason why this session is set up is because there has been lately some increase in transfers of particular IPv4 address, some AS numbers, 2-byte AS numbers. And it's probably a good time to check whether that has any impact on the ability to keep track of who's holding which IP addresses, right? And people are worried that when people are transferring addresses from one country to another or one RRI to another, if it's not done properly, or even if it gets transferred but they didn't bother registering the transfer, then it will create a problem to the operator community. So this is a discussion about that, making sure that is this a problem, or is it just business as usual and we can just continue our running internet as it is? So to start the discussion, so this is mostly going to be a panel discussion, although there will be presentation from Aftab and a short presentation from Aftab and Jeff when it comes to their turn to present their thoughts. But I would like to start perhaps with Anurag. Now, there he is, Martin. Okay. So Anurag, as representing, say, the ISP or the network service provider, right? Let's start with the basic first. As an ISP, when do you check the holder of IP addresses? And how do you do it?
So, is it working? Let me give an introduction to what we do first. So that would make it easier to give an answer to that question on when we do it and how we do it.
Yeah.
So we operate a global backbone, and we are present right now in around 45 countries with probably over 150 POPs. So at this point of time, we are a large operator following open peering policy. So besides checking things when we connect a customer, we also do lots and lots of peering, and we do check for resources at that point of time. So essentially, we have over 20,000 BGP sessions, And whenever we are establishing a session, whether it's with a customer or with a peer, we look into those things. And it's often based on things like who is data, and as well as things like the import and export policy. We would love to see it more with the RPKI checks as well, if we see more uptake on that. But at this point of time, that's pretty much what we look for.
Who is an IRR? You actually look at import-export. you actually look at the import and export policy in the IRR objects. Okay,
yes,
good.
Yes.
That's good to know.
The effectiveness, of course, depends from region to region. We see that being used a lot in Europe and much lower on this side of world, but still, it's there, yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Now, do you see any change with the IP addresses being transferred? Do you see there's a reduction of the quality of the ability to check who is, or things not being registered properly, or is there an increase in that problem?
I would say for our network, probably not much. But yeah, as you know, in general, as a researcher, when I look at the routing table, I do see such problems in general. I'm not speaking specifically about our network in this scenario. We see things like issues with route objects being incorrect for many of the transferred resources. Recently, I was looking at the routing table and found almost like 22 to 23% of routes in 6.6 lakh or 660,000 routes happen to have a mismatch or missing route object, and that creates a major problem on how you identify whether you are trusting the announcement. Well, do you want to trust that announcement or not?
Wow. Okay. So basically, can I then conclude that you don't have a perfect way of checking things. You will use whatever tool is available, and you realize that the IRR, for example, can only answer not 100% of what's in the routing table.
Sure, yeah, that's right.
But that is not an impact of the IPv4 address transfer. It has been, that problem probably has been there for a while, I would imagine.
Oh yes, of course, but I think the things like missing or totally incorrect route objects, that's somewhat slightly more on this side with the transfers. And especially with these transfers, if you see totally incorrect who is and incorrect origin as, how would you trust? And as I said, we operate a global backbone, and we happen to have prefixes which may not be directly connected. They may be customer prefix.
Okay.
And it's too hard to, at that scale, it's too hard to reach out and figure that out, whether it's the legitimate announcement or not. How would you, we would love to have a system where we can technically differentiate between a route hijack or a leak versus just someone missing to update.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just fat fingers. Okay, good. So I'd like to move to Martin then, who's, at this moment, I would see him as representing the CDNs, who operates, globally as well, and try to see if you observe anything different lately with more IP addresses being transferred, particularly from ARIN to ethnic region or to RIPE region. Yeah. So what's your observation there, Martin?
Well, there's actually, let's deal with the direct observations from your question, and then I'll go back and, from a content delivery host or the content generation point of view, talk a little bit about what Anurag just mentioned. So we announce routes out of region to begin with, but the ownership is within one company. So we would have routes that are allocated inside ARIN, but are announced because of our Anycast methodology anywhere in the world. That works. And some people argue that, that's not perfect, and you should be a little bit more localized. Well, if we're trying to do global Anycast, then the answer actually is you have to pick one of 5 RIRs to get that address from, and that address will then, or if you have a legacy address, I suppose you don't have to, but then that address is going to get originated, in our case by the same AS number, anywhere in the world. So let's just talk about that part, and then we'll talk about why our life gets a little bit more complicated.
Okay.
First of all, from an operation point of view, this works. The bits do flow. There's a Cloudflare content delivery network and DNS node here in Kathmandu. The addresses that are announced here are identical to our node in Peru, or our node in London, or our node in South Africa, or our node in Hong Kong, in other words, everywhere. And those addresses are predominantly out of ARIN. There are some addresses that come out of blocks from APNIC, and the routing works. If it didn't work, we wouldn't be in business. So,
Can I pause there?
Yeah.
Why do you have to need to get resources from APNIC, for example, if you
Aha.
already got
Yes.
one in ARIN? Yeah.
right. So we actually have resources from all 5 RIRs, both V4 and V6 addresses. Why do we do this, and under what circumstances do we use them? So we have nearly everything that's customer-facing is Anycast. But we do have non-Anycast addresses which are used for management reasons and for other reasons. And we actually tried, is maybe a better way of saying it, to keep the management addresses from in-region allocations. In other words, a facility in Hong Kong or Singapore is from an APNIC, or Sydney is from an APNIC address. The facility in South Africa is from an AFRINIC address. A facility in Europe is from a RIPE address, et cetera, et cetera. We're a 7-year, coming on 8-year old company. That's rather important to understand, because if you sort of look at the date and time of when IP addresses suddenly became sparse from RIRs, our age of our company is perfect. You know, we got to the point where there were very few IPs available in the various regions. As they hit their last /8, we ended up with only a /22 availability, and that is not enough for us to run just the back-end management of the network. So, as much as from a purist point of view, we wanted to keep the addresses in region, in practice we didn't. We used our larger blocks from other places, and now we just all...
For example, you can get...
We can't. We could, but it actually, there's also being a good net citizen at some point in time. You sort of say, we just don't go that route.
Okay.
Right, so from that point of view, even that part works well. If I announce a RIPE address in Cambodia, no one really complains. If I and by the way, this is important differentiator from the previous question. These are all they're allocated or assigned to Cloudflare. So it's Cloudflare, do it with Cloudflare address. It's very clear. But I'm going to go throw out a few interesting points. So we started RPKI signing some of our IP addresses, not many, and we picked one of our ASs. We have a main AS number that runs 99% of what we do. We have a few other ASs for some special cases. Picked one of those in Europe, and we went through the signing process. But what was interesting in that process is we also understood that with our main AS number being allocated in one RIR and having addresses from various other RIRs, we were starting to push the envelope on the way the RIRs had built their portals for RPKI signing. A simple case is that you are in one region, one country, you get your AS and your IPs, and you go to one portal and you sign. And it turns out, no, we were from over here to over there, and we needed to sign. So, in fact, actually, this actually has been addressed, but it is definitely something that gets a little bit more complicated in a more generalized case as IP addresses move around.
How was it addressed? You actually do your own signing?
No, the option was to do our own signing. No, the option was that at least in RIPE's case, they added a nice little hack where we could essentially import an AS number from ARIN, but only for signature purposes. Ooh. So this wasn't really, this was thought about in the original RPKI RFCs, but I don't know whether the implementation of hosted RPKI quite got it right. Didn't get it right, yes. So we hit that one.
All right.
But moving on.
Yeah.
As a content company, or at least a CDN, one of the things that we measure or need to measure, and this is, by the way, the same for other content delivery networks, is when we get a request coming in from an eyeball, we want to know what country or which region or what location that person is in.
Yep.
So we use public databases, whether they come at a high level from the RIRs, hence sort of like bulk who is type data, normally the delegated file, or we go down with either free or paid for services. So a free service would be MaxMind, paid for service could be MaxMind or others, or self-built databases. When an IP block gets sold from over here to over there, you have a lag. You guaranteed to have a lag.
Right.
You know, why is this IP address showing up in a completely different region?
Yeah.
And yes, there's
And
been
you
a
can't
sale.
serve them with the closest.
Well, because we use Anycast, yes, we can, but our reporting software suddenly will generate
something.
quite different information. So there is a second order issue, which has, I know, been discussed in some RIRs, that in the sale or the movement of an IP block between regions or between countries, you need to get a lot of information out to all of the location, geolocation companies. And it turns out that is more of a headache for us than anything else. The routing table is fine. I'll talk about RADB separately. We'll go back and talk about that. But that's probably our biggest headache in the movement of IPs.
If it's an inter-RIR transfer, then usually the stats file is updated within a day, basically, Okay, interesting. Any comment from you, Anurag, before I move on to Aftab? Do you see the same
Not
issues?
really at this point of time.
Right.
I think while Martin used to work with us, and things have somewhat, things are somewhat common, but I think we operate very different networks, since it's a CDN network with its own IP address and not transiting IP. So it's
but my question is, you being operating also globally and having to, let's say, a resource that was originally owned by someone in Erin and then moved to someone in India, for example. Did you get question on your help desk or about these geolocation related issues? Do you get geolocation?
not I'm aware of. I don't think
No.
there's much.
Okay, so they usually know that it's not the ISP's fault, it's
Yes.
someone else's fault.
Yes, I think we see those cases where someone using their address space from one region, totally in different region, while we do see scenarios where transfers happen and it's totally different entity, different ASN is being used. And as I said, from filtering perspective, that gets a bit trickier.
Okay. All right, so let's move to Aftab, right? So, a lot of routing issues are caused by people, mistakes, honest mistake, manual mistakes. And I think one of the solution, right, it's not the complete solution, but one of the solutions to get people trained on how to do things properly. Now, can you see that what you're now championing, say manners, could help to alleviate this situation, this relatively new situation that Martin and Anurag pointed out?
So the genuine mistake you mentioned is we call it fat finger by slim fingers. So it's actually there is no easy way to figure that out or resolve that problem unless you do automation and don't touch your equipment by your own hands. Let the scripts do the job. Otherwise, you will end up seeing mistakes here and there, and it's challenging. And this is, I mean, if you just recall the discussion we were having last evening, people were asking about the incentives to do the right thing, right? So when we start when we start asking for the incentives to do the right things, well, we have a problem. So we were not asking for something. So we started our discussion from a very basic point that was like,
There's no reward to good behavior.
yes. I mean, as Martin said, we want to be a good netizen first. And that's good behavior. That should be the incentive more than enough, right?
Would you care to present a bit about what
Yeah,
the good behavior that you've been championing?
I have like 4 or 5 slides, if I can just quickly.
Sure. Okay.
It's gonna open up a Pandora box, so I'll just hide after that. So let me do that, please.
Okay. Sorry, on top is clicker.
Yeah, I have the slides, please. Ooh. Well, you all know me, that's Aftab Siddiqui, so yeah. So the biggest problem we have been facing here is, and that's what we started discussing, is reliability of the references, the data. And the problem we have is, Anurag mentioned that we check, they check all the publicly available information. I mean, they're like more than 20, 25 routing registries available. Which one to access? Which one to rely on? If I am in APNIC region, should I just rely on the APNIC database? Well, the case with Cloudflare, they are everywhere. They have to rely on all the databases. And then the inaccuracy on every database is known to everyone. It's not a secret, and it's been known for many, many years. There are some very genuine efforts to make reliable data available from the community and from the RIRs as well. But it's still not there yet. So this is something we have to look into. And then what the big ISPs did, they said, okay, fine, if the data is not accurate around the world, we'll come up with our own databases. So NTT is running their own, Level 3 is running their own. So I said, everybody is building their own routing registries. And the problem is, it's not complete, it may not be accurate, lack of incentives. We were just talking about the incentives. Lack of incentives. I mean, why should I update my database? Why should I update my AS or routing information, or even the route object? Anurag mentioned some statistics like how much inaccurate data is available there, or even there is no data at all. Error-prone manual data entry. If I'm doing the entry by myself, probably I may or may not make a mistake. It just happens. Some routing registries are better, some are complete, and some are accurate. Pick one. So, I mean, it's very difficult to come up with a solution where we can say, well, I'll go with peering DB only. This is the most accurate, most up-to-date, and most relevant. It is better than others, but it is still not there yet. As Sanjay mentioned about the manners, we discussed it about it yesterday, so I'm not going to go into details. I just want to highlight one point on manners, what we have been talking about for last 3 years. Just look at the last point, global validation. It's part of our principles. It's part of what we are asking from you. Facilitate validation of routing information on a global scale. That is, we are asking for 4 things, and it's one of them. This is not very difficult. Yes, IIJ, Mars presented that they have done it. They have most accurate data. I wouldn't say 100% up to date, but still most accurate data available if they want to if anybody else wants to use it. But the thing is, why everybody else is not doing it? And here's where I'm going to open up the Pandora box. Is some resource statistics. Couple of things is like, I'm talking about Nepal only, right? So here, in Nepal, they have around 82 ASs allocated in, most of them allocated last year and this year. So it's a fair bit. Number of IPv4 prefixes announced from Nepal is 304. I got this information from 2 vantage points, one from London and another one from Optus Australia. So it's almost 304 or something. And that is the most interesting graph I have seen anywhere. In Nepal, out of the total advertised prefixes, that was, sorry, this is not 304, it is something more than 304, it's 588 or something. Out of that, 304 are valid. That is the only country I have seen so far which has more valid ROAs than invalids or not founds. I'm not saying it's a good thing, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a thing. The question I have for all these companies, specifically WorldLink, Nepal Telecom, and WebSurfer, because more than 95% of their prefixes are signed. So the question I have is why they have done it. What was the incentive? Like somebody was pushing them to do it? It was just a thing of, well, because APNIC is here, they are asking me to do it, let me do it. Or, well, I didn't want to repeat it because I don't have a manners t-shirt today, so I don't want to say that, well, I have a manners t-shirt, so let's do it again. So, yeah, I mean, when I was in Cybernet back like 5 years back, I did it as well because APNIC asked me to do it. It's a good thing, you should be a good nation. I said, yeah, that makes sense, let me do it. And if you look at the graphs, even people who came after me in Cybernet lies in Asia Pacific on 2nd or 3rd number. It's not a Hall of Fame thing. They did the right thing, but the thing is, what's next? They signed the resources, what's next? How they are doing it? Nothing. How Nepal Telecom is using it? I have no idea. So the question I have is, if anyone from these companies are here, I mean, it's not a wrong thing, you signed your resources. I mean, it's a good thing, but the thing is why? And what's next for you? So saying that it's not there, it is there. People are still signing their resources. And Cloudflare did it as well. That's what he said.
Okay, can I just pause there? Martin, what motivates you to try signing your ROAS? Curiosity or just want to test something?
All right, so a little bit of history. I was sitting in the IETF discussions when the original RPKI work was being done, when the drafts were there, just sitting in the back of the room and sort of going, whoa, this is actually technically simple and solves a problem. Does not solve the problem, see Jeff's talk from yesterday, but it solves a problem. And I was actually just totally, I was like, right, this is the way to go. I love this. I've hit my head against the brick wall with RADB accuracy for years. This one has far more chance of having legs. fast forward a handful of years to your question. I'm not ready yet to sign the main IP addresses that Cloudflare uses around the world. That's a bit sad, actually. So I took a particular AS set of IPs and signed them, which were, we could survive if there was an issue.
Yeah.
2 years plus down the road, there has not been an issue.
Okay.
Maybe 3 years down the road.
It's because people are not using it.
No, but that's actually the point I'm going to make. This is very commendable. 50% of the country.
There's nothing wrong with doing this at all.
There should be nothing wrong with doing this. However, this is the catch-22 for why I have not finished the work. I have no proof, and I've had this discussion with many people, that this is guaranteed to be okay in the long run. Because I can't, there's a negative here that I'm going to state. What if somebody somewhere on the internet doesn't reload a root certificate out of one of the RIRs, or IANA in the future, let's say? What if their code goes belly up one day and all of a sudden they deny my routes because they're signed, but their software, if signature equals true, then allow, suddenly fails? That one-line test.
Yeah.
And so
The danger of automating.
so collectively our conversations have not brought us to signing it because there's a what if.
Okay.
Now, that isn't said as a negative towards RPKI, because I can actually give you another dozen, if not many dozen, examples of things that could fail out there that would cause problems. But the interesting part about this conversation is the other part about the 4 routes you have listed there. It's actually 12, there's a particular, your number's wrong, by the way, because there's a particular network here in Nepal that has 12 routes that are marked as invalid at the moment. So
when did you run this report?
Oh, this morning.
Okay.
Okay.
Someone frantically trying to invalidate the
well,
route.
this report's from yesterday. So if they went from 12 to 4, yay.
That's a good thing.
Okay.
But here's the point. It isn't affecting them in a negative manner because there are only 3 places that are known around the globe that are doing any form of filtering on RPKI data at the moment.
Who are they?
INEX route server in Dublin. Oh, you already know that one. Oh, blast. I don't remember who the other 2 are. So,
anyway,
so my point, the point I'm trying to make is that go back a step even to what Aftab talked about on one of the earlier slides. There is no punishment if you get something wrong. And that is
With
a
the current system.
With the current system. And
So people can just
so things
not maintain things.
sometimes by mistake, not by malice,
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
rarely
Usually
by malice.
it's negligence,
This is by mistake.
Yeah.
If I go out of the region and give you a simple example, there are a whole bunch of IPs that are used by, if my memory is correct, Telmex in Colombia and Telmex Mobile, whatever that is in Spanish, in Colombia. And the second AS, the mobile, which is single home behind, there was a whole bunch of red in its RPKI listing because no one had set it up properly. But it isn't affecting them, clearly. So this is a...
So we
This-
could
this-
have
we don't have a
having
stick
this
at the
brand
moment.
new, we have this brand new technology and people are treating it like the way they treat the IRR. Create it and then not maintain it. Something like that?
There's a particular very large network in this region that has an impressively incorrect set of entries in the IRR, spanning 8 different IRR registries, from AltDB through Reach through you name it. And I've been plotting it for a while. It hasn't changed, it hasn't improved.
Okay.
Because there's nothing to tell them to improve it.
Right. Owen.
Owen DeLong, Aaron Advisory Council, but speaking only for myself. We're starting from the premise that RPKI is somehow a good thing, and I kind of reject that premise. I think that at best, RPKI is mostly harmless. If you're dealing with malice, it doesn't do anything. It just provides a really good hint about who you need to prepend when you hijack something. If you're dealing with fat fingers, yes, it might help in some fat finger cases a little bit, maybe. In virtually all other cases, it's just overhead that doesn't really do anything.
Now I'm going to be positive. It's better than RADB. It's better than RADB, and sadly that isn't saying very much. However, I'm going to still be very pro, because let's look at the half full side of that equation. It is a good start and needs more.
Yeah.
Now, independent of how well or how little it has been implemented, from a simple crypto signing related to an RIR, so we're going to have to ignore legacy routes. From that point of view, it takes us a lot further than where we are, where we were.
Yeah.
And to Owen's point, if it had more around it, so if I accept Owen's premise,
That it's harmless at
that
this
it's
stage.
harmless,
Mostly harmless at the
which
start.
is a phrase that he has stolen from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And perfectly, yeah. That if you were then to build whatever is next on top of that, I wouldn't argue, I wouldn't complain, I would be quite happy about that. But I am going to give you a very simple example of why the mostly harmless is interesting and yet shows that we could do better. Here's a simple conversation. If I go onto my RIR portal, whether it be APNIC or ARIN or RIPE or LACNIC or less so AFRINIC for reasons, and I go through the hosted signing process with RPKI, it does not generate an IRR entry as a shadow.
Okay.
In fact, it doesn't even look at IRR and say, do you think you want to update that one or delete it or do something? It has no relationship. And the argument that I have been given by various RIRs has been, well, yeah, there's IRR and there's RPKI. And I go, no, there are AS numbers and
Associated
CIDRs,
with the
and they're
AS
associated. So they're the same.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. So do you think that possible one step forward is to link them together? It's the way I don't know if you...
Yes, is the answer
way
to that.
Yeah, the domain name is linked to the reverse DNS, for example. We have a reverse DNS domain name. If we update that, then the actual server will change.
Well,
or vice versa.
if they are serving somewhat the same process and they are the beginning of whatever we do next, then yes, they should be linked. And then you'd find more interest in this.
Okay.
But that opens up a whole other conversation.
So just need to
Back to Aftab.
Just want to respond. That was my last slide anyway. So and I'll check if there are more invalids or not again right now. But the thing is, invalids are important, and the problem is, as you highlighted, Martin, as well, that there is nothing wrong if there is an invalid, right? So if you are changing your routing policies and you're not bothered to change your ROAs, like it's the same problem we were trying to address at first place. And another point is, if I have created the ROAs in the RIR's portal, if it is APNIC or any other, do you inform the member that, well, you have made a mistake. And by the time, you have changed your policies and you marked as red or something, because bgp.he.net will tell you
We
it's
actually
red.
thought about that. That's a very good,
Yes.
yeah.
And the thing is, it's when I presented it back in a couple of countries, the best response I got from StarHub was, because StarHub had 98% of them signed, but 3-4 prefixes were invalid, and I said, why? They said, oh, we forgot to update that because we were not aware of it.
Yeah.
And then I'll just make a last comment and run back to towards my seat is, probably we can request Jeff to add the invalid and valid in the CIDR report.
Well, that's a good segue to Jeff's. So can I ask Jeff to quickly present what his thoughts around this thing, right? And then we can continue the discussion.
Well, that's optional. I'm like, what do you want to talk about? You either want to talk about routing security, or you want to talk about cross-region resource management. You want to talk about cross-region resource management? Let's go there. Why do we have RIRs? It's actually a really fundamental question that I don't think folk truly understand. The first RIR that came up in 1991. It was the RIPE NCC. The rationale that Daniel Karenberg and Rob Bloxall made to Steve Goldstein of the National Science Foundation was that European ISPs were finding it extremely hard to get addresses and AS numbers from the one agency that was doing this in Washington. The one agency that was doing this in Washington was the lowest price bidder for a contract to operate this service to the US federal government. And they're, 3 men and a dog employees in a 56 kilobit line, because they were the lowest bidder, couldn't even cope with the American demand, let alone the emerging European demand. So it seemed like a convenience to say to the Europeans, if you don't charge us money and we can just get rid of this load, we'll give you a block of addresses and then you do the allocation function for Europe. Now, this was an experiment. No one really worried about permanence and the future. We all knew for a fact that OSI was our future. And so we didn't really care about the long term. So we were more interested in how folk got addresses, not about recording what we did and who had them. Now, by about 1993 or 4, David Conrad decided that he wanted a different job, and the best way to have a different job was to invent a new one. So he decided that if he invented an RIR in the Asia Pacific, he could actually go and find the new employer, i.e. himself, and he thought that was a really good idea. So he managed to convince a bunch of other gullible people, including myself, that this was a really good idea, talked to Steve Goldstein, and got an allocation of resources for this region. Again, the rationale was very simple, and the reason why it happened was that the NSF was getting a free ride. Addresses were being allocated in Asia Pacific, but it wasn't taking money away from a contract that the NSF had, which by then was called the Internet Contract. It was all about allocation. Now, you fast forward to where we are now, and there are a few myths going around, and Martin seems to have got caught up in one of them, and it's really a bad thing. We are a shop front, not a routing limiter. No matter who you get the addresses from, route them wherever you want, originate them wherever you want. We are not the routing police, really. We don't care as regional registries. We are a convenience on how to get addresses. Now, we work not because of you, oddly enough. It's because the IANA is, if you will, our parent organisation. We are agents of the IANA. And the reason why IANA found this convenient is not only does IANA get this function done for free, but the hardest part of allocating any resource is to be God. To understand that you're not worthy and you are. To take a scarce resource and to hand it out fairly without pissing off too many people. And it's really hard to get that right globally. But to put that function back into each RIR and say, guys, create an open addressing policy forum, work out policies that work for your region, and that's a good thing, is then what we went and did. And by and large, with a number of arguments along the line, we got that sorted out. But we did something unconsciously that's now coming back to bite us really hard. Because in setting up 5 different, as it turned out, allocation policy frameworks, we then had 5 different databases to record what we did. The internet doesn't respect the fact that there are 5. Like every other IANA-based registry, there's only 1. But you know, we're special over here in the addressing space. We needed 5. And at times, the same resource appears in more than one registry or none of them. Because we don't do a very good job. And our databases are different. And so anyone who consults the database, whether it's an IRR, a routing database, a combined allocation and routing database or whatever, you find yourself doing a little bit of a hunt down various rabbit holes because we haven't figured out that what the world wanted, a single consolidated database. And what we're prepared to offer them, 5 disparate, different databases that have a fractured view of the world, you know, we haven't figured out that's a problem until now. Why is it a problem right now? Because we've run out of V4, and all of a sudden folk are moving addresses around the planet. And all of a sudden the fact that we don't have a single consolidated registry is a real problem for folk who are interested. So let's now talk about the interest and what's going on. Originally, in the experimental days, we all thought OSI would take over, have an address. I'll even write down your name if you want me to write down your name, but I don't care. Because in 5 years' time, we're all going to be working for telephone companies doing OSI. So, you know, what the hell? I'll scratch it on this piece of paper. Your name's Owen, you've got this address. Jolly good. Literally, John Postel had a book. I don't think he used pencil. I did think he used ink, but it was a book and he just wrote it down. That's how seriously we took it because he knew something else was going to happen. So the first one was to record what we did. But operators thought, hang on a second, when Jonathan decides to have fat finger trouble and blast networks all over the place, I would like to look up a database and go, hi, what's your phone number? I'm going to ring you and tell you, stop it, because we're coming around and bashing down your door if you don't. I need to know a contact point for operation. And so we kind of formalised our record of what we did by adding enough details to who got it to allow
who become important.
It became what we call who is, but it's all the same registry. And it became a mechanism to kind of allow operators to figure out what's going on. 5 of them, as it turned out, and they're all different. So, you know, if you really want to know where someone is, you go look 1, look 2, look 3, look 4, look 5. You know, computers can do that wonderfully. Humans, it tends to get a bit tedious. And we never really computerized it well, so, you know, this is a manual process and it's painful. So far, so good. The law enforcement folk entered the field. We want this stuff up to date and accurate. Oh, God. Up to date, accurate. We don't look at accuracy. We don't check every 2 months to see whether your address is right and your phone number's right. Law enforcement go, look, we don't want to do this. We want you to do it for free. Oh, God. And so we start to sort of pump up the pressure on our database. Transfers make it more important. And then along comes the CDN folk. Because with the CDN folk, they've already figured out that networks that bring users to their single portal is really stupid. They want to replicate their content all over the planet because that's really fast. That's brilliant. But to understand which replication point you go to, it's really good to understand where addresses are. So now there's this pressure to build location into maps of resources. The moment we're doing the Russian telephone directory, it's all private. Everyone's got their own private database assembled from various bits and pieces. It would be good if we had a big one that was accurate, that sort of did location all over the planet. Would be good, but we don't have it. We don't even have 5 of them. We have a whole bunch of them and they're all kind of piecemeal. So in some ways, the real question is where we are even vaguely where we should have been? Is producing and maintaining 5 distinct, separately policied, separately defined operated databases that do not in unison make a coherent whole a good thing, or is that a bad thing? So is this an APNIC problem, or a, hey, you RIR guys, you really haven't grokked this the way you should have grokked it. Get it together and give us a database. Don't give us 5 little bits of piecemeal scraps of paper. If we had that signal, we might do something. On the other hand, we might just stuff it up. But, that's the first thing. The second thing is to understand who the client is. Right now, with who is and routing resources and so on, it's really hard to automate that process. Really hard. I tell you who I am. I might send you email. You look up who is. It gives you back ASCII text. You match the ASCII text to figure out whether I'm lying or not. This is crazy. This is 2018 and it's crazy. One thing that I always liked about the RPKI is that when I sign something and hand it to you, the fact that I'm Jeff doesn't matter. The fact that I've got a public key and a private key that matches a resource matters. Because when I say something about that IP address, 1.2.3.4, /32, I mean it. And I can sign it. And no one else can sign it. It's me. And in some ways, if we want to get away from 5 different databases, 5 lookups, 5 eyeballs, all the crap that we do today, RPKI can help in more subtle ways than this strange and, to my mind, failure-destined BGPsec. It's dead. Get over it.
So,
inadvertently,
the RPKI solved this 5-region different database.
Okay, so one thing about the RPKI that I've got to say, it's almost the only thing, I'll go further, the only thing the RIRs in concert have ever done to produce one thing.
Agree on one thing. Yeah.
One thing. That's the only time we've ever successfully managed to get it together and give you a technical artifact. Yay, I'll see you, Martin. A technical artifact that works across all the RIRs and doesn't differ. Oh, it's the APNIC flavour. Oh, it's the right flavour. Inside the system, you have to appreciate that is a towering statement of achievement, and one that in our lifetime we never thought we'd be able to do.
I have to disagree. So there's 2 things. First of all, just to go way back, no, I never see the RIRs as routing police, and I know the difference. I'm happy that in the RPKI sense of the word, you are storing data. How somebody uses it is the routing police if they decide to go that route. Right, skip forward to what you just said. Yes, RPKI is amazingly consistent amongst 4 of the 5 RIRs. And then the 5th RIR, ARIN, makes you sign a contract before you can get the root key.
Not anymore.
Would you go to the microphone and say that so that no, I'm serious. Would somebody from ARIN please go to the microphone and say that?
Owen DeLong, Aaron AC, not anymore.
What? Not anymore.
No contract.
Okay, all right. I stand corrected. I'm very happy. Thank you very much for finally coming to the senses. And I know why that used to exist. So, consistency on the RIRs. Thank you very much. However,
it's a pleasure.
Yeah, however, RDAP, not so much.
I didn't say it was.
Right, so we've talked about this word who is on a regular basis within this panel. And by the way, it is talked about extensively if you go into an internet governance or an ICANN environment, or talk about law enforcement agencies who want access to who is data. But just while I've got the microphone, and just to diverge from addressing, but it relates, do not associate who is data with something that runs on TCP port 43 that is the who is protocol, which is actually technically called something else. It isn't called the who is protocol. It's got a different name. So if you want to get at this data in a more programmatic manner, in other words, do a query in a RESTful sense of the word, and then get data back in a machine-readable form, such as JSON-based data, then you move to RDAP. It's who is data, with the lowercase sort of use of the word who is, but the protocol is RDAP. Now, the fact that there are 5 RIRs, and they have slightly different URLs, and then, by the way, you don't even know which one to query when you get given just a random RIR. There's a very easy solution for this, is you forget the RIRs and using RDAP. You only use stat.ripe.net/data and then the rest of the API, because they have all the data from all the other RIRs, and they'll proxy it for you. So the other problem you have is, how do you do a who is on an AS number? Because you don't know which RIR it is. It's easy. You only use LACNIC. Why? Because LACNIC has got a piece of code in there, who is, that goes, that's APNIC. I'll do the who is for you, and
I'm glad you trust me.
it's not the point of whether I trust them. That's not the point of the conversation. I'm just saying that no, let me finish. This is a method provided by an RIR. If you now send me down a different path, because I may have to check whether this always works, I'll have to go off and do this. But this is who is data which is an untrusted path to begin with.
You should worry about
Okay, I do, all right. I don't do many who is's these days, because I've moved into, hopefully, a true RDAP-based environment. But this is messy. This is all messy.
Okay.
And we're the people that are meant to know what we're doing. Forget the general public.
Let me add the point here. We're moving AS numbers and IP addresses between RIRs. True?
Yes.
True.
IP addresses definitely.
Where is an AS numbers?
Adam
Where
is still
is
discussing it.
the
Yeah.
registry, the list of which RIR is authoritative about which AS and which prefix?
Isn't that the IANA page, the PTI page?
The IANA page tells you what IANA did in the past, each /8. The AS registry is a little bit of nothing.
Chunks of
It's
1,000.
remarkably inconsistent about what it purports to describe. So when you actually say, well, where should I look in these 5 databases? If I find 2 of them saying different things about the same resource, who is authoritative does not have an answer today unless you are an insider. There is nothing that we publish that will resolve this issue today. And in some ways, when we talk about, well, good practice, manners depends on good data, I don't believe that our foundations of data are up to par. We should be doing a better job. We should be mapping where prefixes and AS numbers are. Who holds authoritative data? If we can't create one database, at least we should be capable of doing a metadatabase that says where the right record is, and when transfers happen, at least keeping that up to date. But we offer lip service and huge gaps. And folk like RIPE and LACNIC and APNIC as well, we skim each other's data, put it together, and then, Martin, and this is the bit you should worry about, we apply our own heuristics and rules when we have conflicts and gaps. We're making the choices as to who's authoritative, and it's a choice, it's not necessarily the truth. And I'm, again, not sure that our house is in order in this place. We either consistently go, one database, let's just do this right, or we do, it's a metadatabase, we'll tolerate the differences, we'll tolerate the fact that the data is different, we'll tolerate the different character codes, but at least you know whether to go to LACNIC, RIPE or APNIC for the authoritative record. But we don't even do either of those, and I think that's not good enough, personally.
So just to add what Jeff is saying, I encountered that problem a lot because let's take an example of 202/8. It's shared between APNIC and EFRANIC. And it's not consistent. It's not like they divide it into half and give it to APNIC and EFRANIC. It's just bizarre. You have to look at sometimes EFRANIC and APNIC. And so yeah, the problem is still there, and the only smallest ever possible page IANA could come up with was all the /8s there, and the ASN ranges. And it doesn't reflect anything after that. And that's it. So they gave it, and even after that, like old company names are still there, which doesn't even exist. So I mean, they are not planning to update that at all. And the thing is, just forward-looking. My question to, from the putting my ISOC hat back, from the Menace point of view, we say global validation. We really don't care what the methodology or what protocol you want to use. Forward-looking, what do you suggest? Point one, step two, step three.
What do I
Yes, I mean, a practical approach. What do you suggest moving forward?
There are two kinds of problems going on, so let's split them up. One is routing, one is attribution and current holdership of resources. So let's just talk a little bit about routing for just 1 second. The efforts to try and make an absolutely perfect routing system that is impervious to both fat finger trouble and indeed deliberate attempts to subvert it are doomed. And I'm sorry, we just don't know how to do this, and we have no likelihood of being able to know how to do it in real routers.
Not
And
yet.
so-
Not yet. Never say never, but not yet. Yeah, okay.
In my
Carry on.
lifetime, let me go down that path and I'm pretty safe. So in some ways, we've got to live with this in the same way as I've told a few others as through the week. We live with the fact that houses burn down. We live with the fact that people do stupid things with fire, and we have a fire brigade. So sometimes when fire breaks out, you say, come along, put this thing out. And I think with routing, you may have to sort of live with the fact of imperfection, but make sure we understand how we can stop stop the problems. How do you stop the problems? Do you have some theoretical model of absolute truth and look for deviance? Never going to have it. Or do you have established practice, and if you deviate? I always go down to the coffee shop at 8:30. If I'm not there at 8:30, maybe you should worry that's an anomaly. Or if I come down at 9 o'clock, that's an anomaly. So it's not the truth that matters, it's the difference out of pattern. So I think there are ways to do this that are cheaper, easier, and don't rely on perfection that we really could concentrate on and get some decent stuff out of this if we wanted to. The issue around database, the issue around 5 of them, the issue around no meta files, the issue around the fact that we really, after 20 odd years, just haven't managed to do the right job, because allocation is not database, it's not the registry, it's allocation. I kind of despair, and quite frankly, I think I do need to look to the leadership of the RIRs to go, guys, you're sitting on a problem and you've got this money, spend it. But spend it to think about how you want to create a service. Do you, as network operators, the 3 or so that aren't RIR people, you can put your hand up, we know who you are anyway. Do you want a single lookup that tries to push all this data into a single format, single this, that's current, which is going to be a lot of work on the RIR side and will not be cheap to maintain? It's difficult. Or do you at least want a roadmap that says this AS, this prefix, go and look over there? Much cheaper to build, much easier to maintain, and you've still got 5 different databases, but at least you're trying to understand where authority lies. Cheap one meta file, 5 databases. I don't think it's good enough. I think we get paid enough money to do it right. And I think doing it right really is saying we should really create a database that is useful about the cumulative map of where resources are, and we should serve the internet with it, not 5 little versions of its. So, that's where I come from on that.
So I want to ask the question to Anurag actually. What is it that will make your life easier? In terms of being able to determine to find out who is in charge of which block of address.
Well, that's a hard question. I think to some extent I would agree that joint whois effort to some extent they do help out.
Mm-hmm.
We do use jwhois.apenic.net
Yes.
quite a few times. In
Yeah.
fact, A while back, I ended up in changing my scripts to, stop just querying the, just the whois.hyperic.net and just start using jwhois.
So do I.
So,
That was built by Lacnic, by the way.
and the other part is, of course, with things like RPKI, more efforts need to be made to push people to do it. I don't know how many people in the room signed up with their RPKI prefixes just to see a green dot on bgp.he.net. I personally did that even before when I joined Hurricane Electric. It just looks good, and you see green dots. So we need more of such checks. Like, I think there are lots of tools and checks in place at this point of time around IPv6, which encourage you, which tell you you have IPv6. You are on IPv4 and in bracket, please contact your operator for IPv6. But there's almost nothing, on RPKI side where it is validating it and pushing for.
But if the net value of having the green dot is 0, why should people do it?
It's 0 right now. It's not going to be 0 always. Once you have that deployed at a significant scale, you can have different local preferences.
But we're into this whole,
Jeff.
we're into this whole incentive and result. And while this industry is rich and is full of people and full of, surplus resource, you can afford to do things on the basis of something that might happen and give you benefit in the future. But when you're not that well resourced, when what you have to do today is going to have to give you money from customers in your pocket today, sometimes these things, even like V6, get deferred because the green dot doesn't give me money. And so I think we have to be really realistic when we castigate ourselves and say, you should do this because in the future it will be good. These are businesses, not governments. Sure. These are folk who do things for a living, and if they don't make a living, they go broke. And we're not into this business of telling people to do stupid things. We want to support their business. We want to be realistic about the demands we place, and we don't want to push them into places that place their business
But I think
in uncomfortable places.
What Anurag said is simply make it easy for you if you're doing a good thing. And I think that is valid.
Don't give them
right?
a black mark if they don't do it
No,
today,
that's
because
fine.
there's no
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah.
There's no black mark just to.
But that's why I'm saying it.
So it's either there or it's missing. But we do give red mark if it's incorrect, by the way. if it's incorrect, that one should be worried about. And the other point, when you say that, I would get back on your point about that RIRs are not supposed to be route policing, totally agreed. But at the same time, RIRs are supposed to be authoritative of data. So whoever is policing, whether it's operators or someone else, whoever is policing has to look at RIRs for the authoritative data. You cannot deny on that point.
No one is. I'm just saying we should do a better job at it, because when two RIRs claim to be authoritative for the same prefix but give you different data, are we being authoritative or confusing?
Yeah.
Well, obviously we're being confusing. We're not helping anyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so this is my point. I'm not saying, we shouldn't be authoritative about anything. No one's ever claimed that. It is our job to maintain a registry.
Yes.
We currently maintain 5 of them.
Yes.
We don't quite get it together.
You can't separate the routing totally out of it, because routing and whatever automation tools are there, they totally depend on
Depends on
data.
it, yeah.
So it's not total disconnect.
I'm not
between them.
arguing that other folk will use that data to help them in routing. That's fine.
Yeah.
And it's not independent. But as you say, and as I say, and we are in violent agreement here, so let's just understand, the RIRs are not the routing police. We're not given a mandate to be the routing police. We have no policemen out there that we can haul on and slap poke around the head for doing bad things in routing. That's not our job.
Agreed.
Okay?
Okay.
Yes. So just, I know we are going towards the close, and the thing is, we absolutely agree, I think, that RIRs are not police. But there are two ends of this problem. At one end, we have RIRs, and at the other end, we have the resource holders. So we have to address the problem from both ends. Otherwise, it won't be resolved. If we even have a consolidated one single database full of garbage data, it's not going to resolve anything. So the problem is RIRs has to do a good job, for sure. But as a community member, we have to do a better job as well, fixing the record. And the thing is, it brings back the same discussion. Who's going to tell the operators to fix their record? Because RIR is not a police. So again, the accuracy of data is something which we have to address, as well as a single point of accessing the data. So
Okay.
I'm putting this question back to the
request.
Deputy DG of APNIC, not as the moderator. Like, what measures RIR are taking to fix the problem from their end? Because, okay, fine, we have been talking about the problem from the other end for a very long time.
Yeah.
But nobody questioned RIR that, well, you have a problem to fix as well. Let's
Okay.
do it together rather
Sure.
than just
Yeah.
we fix one thing and then you say, okay, fine, let me fix it now.
Yeah. Martin, last words. What do you want us? What do you need for things to be better, easier for you?
About is edge case situations. Now, there's a problem with that, but a majority of the looking up a route, knowing whether it's owned by somebody, whether it's valid, this is actually dealt with. The majority
Kind of works.
kind of works, and there are caveats with a lot of what Jeff said, but the reality is that where we sit today, we actually do a good job, or should be able, sorry, that's the right way to say, should be able to do a good job with the majority of routes. It is these edge cases of either IP addresses moving due to acquisition or due to a sale or the like, which cause us problems. Oh, and then we have nefarious issues that occur, and they definitely cause us problems. So they're just as edge case as anything else. So the reason I say let's take a step back is that while it's very important to be accurate, no, it's actually fundamental to be accurate, there's still so much that we could clean up on just the general day-to-day life, and I can talk a lot about IRR in that environment, but that's before you get into the edge cases of IPs moving between regions and the like. But you've actually made a very good point, which has now made me sort of take a note, and I've got to go fix something, yeah, I have to go back and look at the data I'm using and say, am I really querying the right place? And what if I get an incorrect answer? And what effect does that have? In most cases, this is related to reporting tools, not to do with a operational, shut down a route or don't allow a route. So the good news is I don't think it affects that much, but on the other hand, it means work. So thank you, I think. But it's a long conversation to go fix the stuff. Manners may well be one of the tools that will force us to fix these issues one by one. Manners is best practices, but it has to say that certain other data is correct, and it may actually fix an awful lot of things by just asking questions.
Okay, so I'm going to close this session by probably answering Aftab's question and challenge you. What does APNIC do? I think we number one is we are very, very aware of the need to have a quality database that accurately maps a number to an entity. Now, if we have got that right, we also want to have the entity to be responsive. You see? It's no use to have a database that maps a number to an entity, and then when you report to this entity, hey, there's something with something related to the resource, and they did not respond. So the quality of the entity is important in making sure that they are responsive. I would rather have less data but responsive registry entities in the registry than too much data pretending that, whoa, it's a comprehensive, big database, but less responsive. So I think we are aware that the database is there for a reason, and the main reason is for operations, and lately security, and also attribution in the end. Who is responsible? And it's better to map it to something that is responsive, and that's what I think APNIC is going to work towards. And in doing so, of course, collaborating with the other RIRs and see if we can do something together around that. Now, on the protocol, the database protocol, I think we all know that the future is this machine consumable data, the RDAP basically, because that's a machine consumable data. That can be human consumable as well with the right transformation. Because really, Port 43 has been there for too long, and I think, even the domain name people are also moving to RDAP as well. So I think we need to move forward. And the RDAP has a referral capabilities, so it knows. It has this ability to know that it's not here, but I can pass the query on to someone else who may know the answer. So I think that is a feature of the protocol that kind of probably help fix this single database problem, because if we have 5, but the 5 are talking among themselves and serving as if it's a single database, that's as good as having one database, right? So that's probably the aim. And of course, RPKI is another strategic direction that we have, not necessarily for routing, secure routing, but simply from the fact that it helps people who receive delegation prove their holdership, their custodianship of that data, and that I think will help a lot. So a combination of RDAP and RPKI maybe is the future that we're looking at, for your information. Is there anything, before I close this session, thank you for your patience and attention. Is there any comment from the floor, other RIR, other organization in that organization, ISOC maybe, who wants to make comments? Thank you.
John Sweeting with Aaron. Just want to say, I think the actual transfer market is actually good in helping to clean up a lot of the whois that has been, the data that's been inaccurate for a long time, and it's because a lot of people are having to do their merger updates and correct all that data before they can do anything to move those IPs anywhere else, Jeff.
Yep.
That's why. And it actually is cleaning it up.
So what we find is that the content, particularly of the receiving party, reflects a more current view of the world in that
Exactly.
database. That's great.
Exactly.
The fact that there's no metadata to say, APNIC, Aaron has now the authoritative version of a record for this AS or this OBP, that's missing still.
Yeah,
and
we
so
need
you're
to fix
kind of
that.
right, but there's this upper thing going, well, that's still not there.
You're
Damn.
right, because if we don't do that,
We
then
don't
we'll be
do that.
right back where all that data that we're updating and getting
Yeah.
accurate today, 2 years, 3 years from now, will not be accurate any longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's use this opportunity while people are transferring things to refresh the data, to update the data, especially the legacy data. So I agree with you, John.
Alain Durand from ICANN. I was somewhat surprised that none of you mentioned what's happening in the market where you have private contracts to lock in addresses that are not transferred through the official channels. And I would
You
like
mean leasing?
leasing is a form of it, private contract, futures, whatever. So I would like to ask the panelists their thought about this, and how does it reflect on the accuracy of the database and the role of the database?
Well, isn't that essentially what every ISP does on a regular basis? And okay, so This is an AP-NIC meeting, and if this was a RIPE meeting, there would be a whole session about the pedanticness of PA-PI space and the generation of insanely atomically small information inside the RIPE WHOIS database about every minor allocation. But this is not a RIPE meeting, and that pedanticness does not exist.
I'm not talking about micro allocation to specific customers. I'm talking about people buying the right at a future point in time to transfer addresses and essentially locking up those addresses in different
And
places.
I'm just equating, saying that could be the same way. But if people don't want to update WHOIS in any variety, then we're back to square one, quite frankly.
It is just there's one policy proposal talking about that, trying to facilitate this leasing arrangement similar to what has been allowed in RIPE, but it's not. I don't know. Let's see the policy discussion tomorrow whether this will carry on, because the authors has gone MIA. That simply just be a matter of policy. Again, the APNIC Secretariat would just tell us what the community wants. If they think that we need to be able to reflect the leasing reality, I think the proposal for leasing is change the registry during the leasing contract and then automatically flip back when the contract expires. I think that was the proposal or the feature that they want, but we'll see. I mean, if it gets traction, then we'll have a policy around that. If not, then like the poor man's, the alternative is simply use assignment, just like normal ISP. But, this is, I think, to go into policy matters that I don't want to really touch at this point. But just to conclude and summarize then, it seems like the recent increase in transfer has triggered some thought process, has triggered some issues that make us rethink again what registry really means. And I think this is good. This discussion is really good because it tried to capture the spirit, what is the registry? And the registry today is different from the registry when the first RIR are born back in 1993, because the circumstances are different. We are now running out of IPv4 and so on. So thanks for all the discussion. I think we had a lot of things to think about that would guide what the RIR, APNIC in particular, but the IR collectively needs to do better to serve you all. So with that, I would like to thank all the panelists, and please don't stop providing us feedback. You have direct channels to us, and the floor as well. If you have thoughts, if you don't, please email me or find APNIC staff and let us know what you need. And then we'll do our best to meet your need. Thank you.